The guy that shot that professor wore a red flannel shirt and had a beard. I know it. I saw it. That's what happened. Hi, Tony DeWitt here. I'm a Missouri appellate attorney, retired, and I bring you a fresh perspective on the law without offering any legal advice. So pull up a chair. This is what we're discussing today. That statement you just heard is very similar to a statement made by a number of students after an in class demonstration. Today, we're going to talk about a bunch of things that really bother me about the Karen Reed case. But we're going to start with something that's a real problem for police officers, investigators, and prosecutors with a God complex. I want to start with a story. It happens to be a true story. Psychologist Robert Buckhout in the 1970s staged a mock assault in front of 141 students during a psychology lecture. After the staged incident, students were asked to identify the assailant from a photo lineup. 7 weeks later, only about 40% of the students were able to make an accurate identification, highlighting the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. Buckhout also conducted another notable experiment titled Nearly 2,000 Witnesses Can Be Wrong, where a mock crime was broadcast to a large audience and viewers were asked to identify the perpetrator. The results further demonstrated the fallibility of eyewitness identification as a significant number of the viewers misidentified the suspect. During the class discussions, the professor used subtle clues to shape the description of the assailant. He would ask things like, "Did anybody see the red shirt he was wearing?" "Oh, yeah, it was a red flannel shirt." So that got baked into the discussion. And how long was his beard? Well, it was really kind of short cropped, right? Kind of like mine. And that got baked into the description. And the guy wore a completely different colored shirt and didn't have a beard. So you can see how, as an investigator gets the idea that he knows who did something, he can describe the perpetrator to the witness through questions and then get the witness to adopt his description of that particular perpetrator. So, as a result of this, many of the students came away with a view that this guy was indeed that person, except it wasn't, and they stuck to that story until they were shown the video. That's a perfect example of something called confirmation bias. We accept and remember that which supports our theories, and we reject contradictory theories. So, what is confirmation bias? It's a tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's own pre existing beliefs or hypotheses. Some might also call it a psychological theory where people reinforce their biases, and that bias causes them to process information through their biases. You might also think of it as people see what they want to see, and to a certain extent, that is absolutely true. Here's the human psychology behind it. The human brain takes cognitive shortcuts, called heuristics. The brain simplifies complex decisions by using these mental shortcuts. If it latches on to an analysis of facts as the truth, then any contradictory evidence must be a lie. Confirmation bias reduces mental discomfort from conflicting information. That's called cognitive dissonance, the theory by Leon Festinger in 1957. Holding two contradictory beliefs causes mental discomfort. So we resolve that discomfort by rejecting or minimizing the contradictory information. We want to be right, so we assume we're right, irrespective of the contrary evidence or information. Selective attention and memory. We notice and remember evidence that aligns with our beliefs and more easily speaks to our biases, our personal experience. For example, when we go into the Longhorn Steakhouse, I look at their menu and I notice that big, juicy steak on the menu, and I overlook that salmon every time. I can remember what a good steak tastes like, but I can't remember the last time I had fish that was memorable, which probably means I'm not getting fish cooked right, but my wife doesn't like fish, so I don't wind up eating fish anyway. But my point is that's real world. You can see cognitive bias every day in the real world. You want to know how? Turn on Fox News and then turn on MSNBC. What you'll find is that conservatives favor Fox News while liberals favor MSNBC. You'll watch the information in the news that aligns with your biases and your beliefs. Studies show we remember information that supports our view and dismiss or forget contradictory stories. Then we get to the social media echo chambers. Algorithms are an important feature in both Facebook and Twitter and in YouTube. Algorithms show users content similar to what they've already liked or shared. For example, if you watch a lot of videos on YouTube about World War II, you'll get a lot more videos on YouTube about World War II. On platforms like Facebook and Twitter, the algorithms reinforce existing beliefs and isolate users from contrary viewpoints. That's basically to give the customer what they want. You want to see kittens playing with yarn, you're going to get kittens playing with yarn. You want to see body cam footage, you're going to see body cam footage. One recent incident, the birther conspiracy, underscores this. Because his middle name was Hussein and because his father was Kenyan, there were people who believed that President Obama was not born in the U.S., so they claimed he was not eligible to be president. To a certain degree, that also happened to John McCain, who was actually born in the Panama Canal Zone. But despite evidence, birth certificates, newspaper, birth announcements, people continued to believe that Obama wasn't born in the U.S. Conflicting evidence that was dismissed as fake, like the birth certificate and all of that, that was nothing. They just ignored that completely. And what's really funny about that is if you have U.S. parents and you're born in a foreign country, you have U.S. citizenship because your parents were citizens. You can find that if you're interested in INA Section 301C, G, and just Section 309 generally. So the birther conspiracy was never supportable under any set of circumstances, but that didn't stop people from believing it. You also have this thing called sports fan bias, and I have a perfect example of that as well. In the 1985 World Series, there was a really bad call. It was a bad call that helped the Royals and hurt the Cardinals. And as a result, the Royals won Game 6, which let them go on to Game 7, where they won their very first World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals from across the state. And to this day, there are people in Kansas City who will say, no, it was a good call. It was the call the umpire made. But if you look at the film and you look at the actual photos of the event and the video of the event, you can tell that it was a bad call. Bad calls happen. But here's the thing, fans believe that referees favor the opposing team even if the number of bad calls is equal. They remember unfair calls against their team and they forget the ones that help them. So in the end, the theory is that it all evens out. But you can tell that some people do have a sports fan bias. There's even some sports fan bias in the Karen Reed case because there are a lot of people who just absolutely know that Karen Reed is guilty and a lot of people who absolutely know that she's innocent. And I don't think anybody knows for certain, other than Karen Reed, whether she's guilty or not. But I can tell you this much, the evidence in many respects doesn't stack up the way the prosecution thinks that it does. So why does cognitive dissonance matter in the Karen Reed case? Because it impacts decision making. In legal cases, it can cause jurors to fixate on evidence that supports their early impression of guilt or innocence. It is why the prosecution has such a tremendous advantage in a criminal case, and it's also the reason why no decent criminal lawyer ever bypasses the chance to have a opening statement where he can lay out his theory of the case up front. Because once you get the prosecution bias into your head as a juror, that's probably what you're going to come out with at the end. People who believe Karen Reed is guilty stubbornly refuse to consider evidence that supports innocence. And people who believe Karen Reed is innocent tend to undervalue the prosecution's evidence, probably because they can't stand to listen to Hank Brennan. The key takeaway, though, is confirmation bias is a normal human tendency, but recognizing it is the first step toward clearer, more balanced thinking, which is why you have a lot of times in these criminal cases the defense lawyer coming up and talking about a rush to judgment. What he's really talking about is a rush to the human tendency to have confirmation bias. You figure out who you think the person is who did the crime, and you build your evidence based on that instead of doing everything else. I saw a case last night about a woman in Colorado Springs who was alleged to have stalked and harassed by text message her former boyfriend and his new girlfriend. The police, in an effort, I guess, to stop the harassment, arrested her a total of 4 times. What they didn't do was ever download her phone. You know how they've done downloads in the Karen Reed case and they know all the stuff from the cell phones? The Colorado Springs police never downloaded this cell phone information. You can find that story on YouTube if you want to look into it. But that's a clear case of confirmation bias. They worked off of screenshots. So confirmation bias is a real problem in police work, and it's a real problem in law, because most of the time when the police bring a case to the prosecutor, he takes everything as gospel, even though in some cases it is not. So the confirmation bias in the Karen Reed trial, I think, is pretty easy to see. The state's theory, as I understand it, is that Karen Reed put the car in gear after John O'Keefe got out of the car. Then she drove forward. Then, while he was still standing in the street, backed up really fast, hit him, and knocked him over to the flagpole. Now, there are numerous reasons why I think this does not line up. Before we get there, let's take a look at the scene on the ground. This is from Google Street View outside 34 Fairview Road. A little star down there on the bottom marks a little piece of pavement that looks like somebody kind of got wild with the tar wand, but it's directly across from the flagpole where ostensibly John O'Keefe's body came to rest. So I was curious and I wanted to see exactly what that distance was, or at least be able to give some kind of an estimate. So I did a little additional work on that. And this is from the satellite view on Apple Maps, and you can see the house. You can see where the red squiggle is up at the top. That is an index that indexes the number of feet. The numbers are 13 and 26 that matter here. That is the distance. They're somewhere between 13 and 26 feet. If you look at the red line down at the bottom there, that is drawn between the squiggle on the pavement made with the little tar wand all the way over to where John O'Keefe's body was. So somewhere between 13, 15, 20 feet from the roadway is where, if the theory is correct, he came to rest. So if I understand the state's theory, she would have had to have hit him hard enough to knock him basically close to 20 feet without leaving any trauma on his body. In other words, the entire force had to be directed at his head because it crushed his skull more or less and didn't cause any neck injury or thoracic trauma. And with that one head wound, had to have knocked him that distance. I don't think the physics add up there. So that's one of my significant criticisms here. If anyone believes that I've got this wrong, please let me know, because I don't want to mislead anybody. She would have had to do this while the streets were wet and slick. That's just, I don't know how she would know that she'd be able to do it. In order for the physical injuries to line up, she would have had to hit him in the head with the tail light without leaving hair or blood behind on the tail light, and, more importantly, without damaging her vehicle. She would have had to hit him in such a way that it crushed his skull in the front and the back simultaneously, and then thrown him over to the flagpole without breaking any ribs, or more importantly, breaking his neck, which is pretty much impossible. The autopsy of Boston police officer John O'Keefe revealed several significant injuries. Dr. Irini Scorti-Bello, the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy, testified that O'Keefe's cause of death was blunt impact injuries of the head and hypothermia. She noted multiple blunt force injuries, including brain hemorrhages and skull fractures on both the front and back of his head. Additionally, there were lacerations on the back of his head, bleeding on both eyelids, swelling of the eyes, a small cut on his right eyelid, and superficial scratches on the left side of his nose. His right arm had scrapes of various sizes, and there was bruising on the back of his hand, a faint scratch on the back of his left hand, and a small abrasion on the side of his right knee. And Dr. Scorti-Bello observed that internal signs consistent with hypothermia, such as small areas of bleeding in the stomach lining and diffuse hemorrhage of the pancreas and surrounding tissues, supported a theory of hypothermia. Toxicology reports indicated O'Keefe had a blood alcohol level of 0.21 grams per deciliter and a vitreous humor alcohol level of 0.28 grams per deciliter, suggesting significant intoxication at the time of death. But the manner of death was left undetermined because the doctor said she didn't have enough information to conclude whether the injuries were accidental or intentional. This ambiguity has been a focal point in the trial, with the prosecution arguing that Reed struck O'Keefe with her SUV, while the defense contending that he was assaulted elsewhere and left outside. Furthermore, the defense introduced expert testimony suggesting that some of O'Keefe's injuries, particularly those on his arm and hand, could be from a dog attack. Dr. Murray Russell, a former emergency room doctor, testified that the arm injuries resembled those from a large dog bite. Then you have the puzzling testimony from yesterday.
As you were parked at the driveway the entire time, that generally 5-minute time, did you ever see anybody get out of the SUV and walk down the street towards the driveway?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, I did not, sir.
Did you ever see anybody walk past your truck and up the driveway?
No, I did not, sir.
Did you ever see any person other than your sister outside of those vehicles the entire time that you were at Fairview?
Objection. I'll allow it.
No, I did not, sir.
And sir, it took a couple of minutes for Julie to come out after Ricky parked the F-150.
Yes.
When she did come out, you opened the door and you had a conversation with her while she stood between the door and the passenger compartment of the F-150?
Repeat that, please. Sorry.
Sure. When she did come out, she approached the F-150, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you were in the passenger's compartment, right?
Correct, sir.
You opened up the passenger's door, correct?
Correct, sir.
And she sort of, you stayed in the vehicle, right?
Correct, I never left.
And she came sort of into like the crook of the door and the passenger's compartment?
Yes, sir.
All right. You had a chance, how close did she get to you?
I could have popped her on her nose if I wanted to.
Okay. And you had a chance to observe her and size her up, correct?
Correct, sir.
You spoke to her for maybe about 5 minutes was your best estimate?
I wouldn't say 5. I'd probably say 2 or 3.
Okay. But in any case, you did have a chance to observe her, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was clear to you that your sister Julie seemed like she had had a few drinks, correct?
I mean, yeah, it was 12:30 in the morning, so yes.
And she called you for a ride, right?
Yes, she knew that Ricky was driving.
Right. And when you arrived there, there was a discussion about whether she'd actually take the ride, right?
Correct, sir.
If she was just going to come out and take the ride, there would have been no need for the conversation, correct?
Correct.
But do you recall previously testifying that you were out talking to Julie for over 5 minutes?
I would not say over 5 minutes, no.
Okay. Do you deny that it was about 5 minutes?
Objection?
I'll allow it. Do you deny it was about 5 minutes?
Could have been.
Okay.
I'm not.
Fair enough. And you talked with her about whether she wanted to go in the truck and leave with you, correct?
Correct, sir.
You also talked about whether instead you, Heather, and Ricky would go into the house to join the gathering there.
Correct, sir.
There was a back and forth that you really thought was unnecessary, correct?
I wouldn't say it would be unnecessary. It's just a common question if you want to come in and have a drink.
You have testified in the past that Julie can be kind of a pain in the ass, correct?
I mean, all siblings can be, yeah.
In any case, Julie decides to go back inside and you decide to leave, correct?
Correct, sir.
Ricky did not speed up the street at that time.
No.
He just gradually pulled out.
Correct, sir.
His direction of travel took him right past the black SUV that was now in front of you, correct?
Correct, sir.
He passed the black SUV on the left, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you were in the front passenger seat at that time still, correct?
Correct, sir.
So you were closest to the black SUV of the people that were in your vehicle as you passed it, correct?
Correct, sir, yes.
And you were closest to the driver's side of the black SUV, correct?
Correct, sir.
You noticed that the interior dome light was on, correct?
That is correct, sir.
That lit up the whole front compartment of the SUV, did it not?
Yes.
It lit up the driver's seat and the passenger's seat, correct?
All I could see was the driver at the time, sir.
Understood. But the light wasn't just shining just on the driver. It wasn't pointed at the driver.
I would say they were both lights that go down at both seats, correct? They were on.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So you could see both seats in the front driver's
I
compartment.
couldn't
correct?
see past the woman.
Well, you only saw one.
I only
person.
saw a woman. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes.
No problem. It allowed you to see into that front compartment.
Yes.
All right. And you saw one person inside the car at that time.
Correct, sir.
It was a woman with long hair in the driver's seat, correct?
Correct, sir.
And she looked like she was alone.
Yes.
You didn't-
What's amazing is what he didn't see. If indeed John O'Keefe had not gone into the house yet, he would have been seen in the SUV. Since he was under observation at that point, we know that Karen Reed couldn't have hit him yet. It would have been seen. If they were arguing, that would have been seen, because usually people throw their hands and gesture and gesticulate when they're angry with somebody else. If they were arguing, that would have been obvious. He didn't see John, he only saw Karen. He didn't see anyone go into the house. So if the prosecution is right, Karen Reed would have had to wait until all those people were done talking to let John O'Keefe out. Then she would have had to race forward and then race backward to hit him before leaving. And in a feat that effectively defeated the forces of physics as we know them, channel him into the flagpole with his bilateral head injuries, front and back. It's a lot more consistent that he was beaten, I think. A car injury would have produced an injury in the front of the head if she hit him with the car. In other words, the tail light hitting him would have caused that. There also would have been some impression on the head from where the tail light hit him. That isn't what happened. What's important to remember here is that he's visiting with his sister. His sister is an annoyance at this point. She's called him for a ride, but now she doesn't want to go. She wants to stay and drink some more. And he's having this conversation with her in a way where his view, if he is sitting in the passenger seat and he turns to the left, in order for her to have a conversation with him, so he's facing her out the side door, there's a good chance that he probably doesn't pick up in his peripheral vision John O'Keefe going into the house. So even though that would have been the person who would most likely have seen him go into the house if he went into the house, it's also more likely than not that his view and his time and his attention was focused on his sister. And so that's a really important witness, at least for the defense. And the reason I think it's important for the prosecution is not because it somehow establishes that he didn't see anybody go into the house. I think what it's important for is that the state was trying to take the sting out of that testimony, because if he hadn't been called on direct by the state, he would have been called by the defense in the rest of the trial. Again, it's one of those things that it's another brick out of the prosecution's wall, but it requires you to have some avoidance of this confirmation bias of having saying, obviously he didn't go into the house. Except then how do you explain the rest of the testimony where he goes by the SUV and the lights are on in the SUV and he can't see John O'Keefe? Again, Karen's statement was that he went into the house and she was waiting for him. So that seems to be a problem, at least in my view, for the prosecution. The next witness on cross says this.
When you left 34 Fairview, I want to follow up very briefly on a couple of things that you said just before Mr. Brennan sat down under questioning by him. When you left 34 Fairview to join Jen McCabe at her invitation to take you home, you left through the front door, correct?
Yes.
As opposed to the side door, it's a little confusing. The front door has the brick stoop and the stairs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the door that you normally would leave through, or did you normally leave through the side door, come and go through the side door? What was your more ready habit and practice?
Probably the side door.
Okay. When you left through that front door, there was nothing obstructing your view as you walked out, correct?
Correct.
You could see to the left, the driveway, you could see to the right, over toward the flagpole, nothing obstructing anything, correct?
Correct.
There was a light dusting of snow at that time when you left just after, what time was it? 12:45, 1?
Probably 1:30,
1:30.
1:45. Yeah.
Got it. So you leave at 1:30, there's still just a light dusting of snow on the ground?
Yes.
The yard is flat?
Yes.
You could see all the way out to the flagpole?
Yes.
You didn't notice anything unusual at that time when you looked out toward the flagpole walking out of that front door?
I didn't notice anything. I wasn't looking out at the flagpole, but yes.
You were looking in that direction. When you walk out of the door, obviously you're standing, walking out of the door toward the front yard, correct?
Correct. But as I stated, I was looking down at my shoes in front of me.
Okay. Obviously, then you have to, at some point, you have to look up to see where you're going. You have to turn left to go to the driveway, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, then you walk over and walk parallel to the yard again to walk over to the car, correct?
Yes.
And as soon as you walked out of the stoop, you had to figure out where the stairs were, so make sure you don't fall down the stairs, right?
Yes.
But you're still looking up, like normal, correct? At some point.
Most likely.
My question is, you didn't see anything unusual in the yard, did you?
No.
And courtesy of Apple Maps, here's the path that she would have taken out the front door. She would have had to have turned left, walked down to the driveway, and then down the driveway to the vehicle. And of course, the star over there is where his body, if it had been there, would have been, and she didn't see it. I think from the distance involved, it would be very, very difficult not to have seen a human form lying in the snow with snow falling on it. His shoes would have stuck up. His outfit would have been easily recognized as a human form. If indeed he had been hit by a car, one would expect that he would be calling for help if he was still conscious. Lots of things in this particular case just don't add up, and this is just another one of them. It's clear no one saw John O'Keefe lying on the ground, even though there were people who left by the front door after the point where Karen had left and the point where any vehicular assault would have occurred. They minimize this lack of evidence. In other words, the witnesses themselves downplay it because they want to be helpful to the state, apparently, by saying, well, I was looking at my shoes. Okay, I can understand that a little bit, but you're telling me you didn't see a man laying, dead basically under the flagpole? That defies logic, in my opinion. The other thing that it defies is my own personal experience and probably the experience of many of you. If you or someone you love has ever hit a deer on the highway, then you know that even a small deer can wreck your fender. It can wreck whatever part of the car you hit it with. I had one hit me. It ran into my car while I was going 30 miles an hour. It ran into my car on the driver's side door, and it dented the door so badly I couldn't open the door easily. Now, the other thing is you've got this facial trauma and head trauma, but no bodily trauma. People who are hit by a car and get thrown to the extent that they wind up over by the flagpole, you would expect that that would have caused a lot of bruising along the upper body. How do you hit somebody in the head with a taillight and then not hit the rest of their body? That doesn't make any sense. So the cracked tail light, the lack of a dent, no malformation of the body of the car, none of this adds up to a vehicular assault. What it adds up to is a physical assault somewhere else. That's my interpretation. That's what I have for you today. I hope you found it helpful, interesting, or maybe both. If there's a subject you'd like me to discuss, please feel free to send me an email at the address above. If you like what we do, please feel free to subscribe and come on back to the beach tomorrow. I release videos every weekday, weather and work permitting. If you have the opportunity today, do a kindness for your fellow man. It makes the world a better place, one kind act at a time. And now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine that you might like.